Alright, thumbnail bit's done. Hello and welcome to another edition of Josh Wants to Talk About Movies. I'm currently not wearing pants. I hope you all are doing well with quarantine and everything else that's going on in the world. The main thing is that I'm just hoping that you all are staying safe. These times are very tough, especially when it comes to finding new material to watch. Thankfully, Disney has just uploaded a new bit of content to their streaming platform Disney Plus, and that movie is the 2020 film Artemis Fowl. So going into it, I was pretty blind. I never read the book. I never really looked at the plot synopsis of the movie before I went and watched it. I never even really saw the trailer more than once, and coming out of it, it's really hard to describe Artemis Fowl. The story essentially follows a young genius named Artemis whose father has gone missing, and in trying to find his whereabouts discovers this magical world filled with fairies, leprechauns, orcs, I believe. I think there's goblins. Yeah, I think there's goblins. And Artemis finds himself in the middle of this major conflict of finding this magical device that could destroy the world as they know it. And so it's up to Artemis to try and fight for good and make sure that nothing bad happens. I'm a little late to the party. I think we've all read the articles and seen the videos of people trashing this movie before, but before I really get into the nitty-gritty on why this film isn't really working for me, let's talk about the positives for a second. And weirdly enough, there are a couple. The one thing I will give is that in terms of casting, I think Josh Gad really tried. And I don't mean to say that he was doing a bad performance. His character was a bit iffy, but we're still trying to stay on positives here. He definitely was bringing his all to the character. I think he really had a lot of fun shooting his scenes, and he brought something enjoyable to the movie that put it just a little slight notch above. I like the world that they had. I think the world was really cool. I like the ideas of old fantasy and old folklore, very generic folklore, leprechauns, fairies, all of that, and made it like very technological. And the weapons they had were very unique designs, nothing I've really ever seen before. So that was really fun. So here are the main things that I kind of had an issue with Artemis Fowl. One, it just was giving me a really hard reason to care. And I know that sounds harsh, but here's what I mean. So the first bit of the movie is all about newsreel exposition, talking about who Artemis Fowl is, what his predicament is, who his dad is, his whole background. We transition to Josh Gad's character, whose name was... What was his name? Mulch Diggums. He is like in this interrogation room, and there's this faceless interrogator asking him questions, and Mulch is like, "Oh, you don't want to know about the father. You want to know about the son, Artemis Fowl." And then he starts narrating a good portion of the story. So we're just getting more stuff being told to us. And I gotta, just a little side note. If you're gonna have a narrator, I think the best thing to do is not have a raspy voiced character talk about important details. It kind of gets you not really well connected with the film. Nevertheless, so he starts telling us details about Artemis Fowl, how he's a super genius, how he's like this cunning, brilliant child, most amazing kid in the world. You're being told this information, you're not really seeing it. And then we finally get introduced to him, and he's now talking to this therapist, and this therapist is now telling us things about Artemis. His mom is dead. He's lashing out. He has a hard time connecting with people. He doesn't like relying on people. And again, it's just more things being told to me. It's not really something where I'm learning about him through what he's doing, more like somebody's literally reading the book to me. Fantasy's hard. Fantasy's hard to really connect an audience to, especially through movies, because you have a limited screen time to put in a whole lot of backstory. And the easiest way you can let the audience know so much backstory before we get to the actual story is just through some open narration or text crawl. It's been done before. It's been done in popular films too. It's not a bad thing. It's just you have to know what's important that needs to be said and what's important that needs to be shown. And so when I'm being told who Artemis is and not seeing what he's like, that doesn't really make me connect with him more. And then we're introduced to this city called Haven City. It's like this metropolitan, Manhattan-like city where all of these magical creatures come together, and it's supposed to, unveil this whole new world that's unseen to us. The only problem is Artemis isn't there and we see it, and I don't know anybody there. We see Mulch Diggums eventually. He's in a prison line, but there's really nobody there that I can connect to when I'm seeing this world. Now, that's not to say that you can only unveil a magical world when you have a main character witnessing it. It doesn't have to be like that. It makes it harder for me to care. And I think the whole issue I can sum up with Artemis Fowl is in one question. Why do I care? And it has a hard time really answering that for me. Also, the story, unfortunately, is fairly limited. I was shocked to discover this film was actually 93 minutes long. If I had gone to a theater and paid money to see that, I would kind of be appalled that I paid that much to see basically what's like 3 episodes worth of television on the big screen. Now, that's not like to say that a film can't be 90 minutes, but given the perspective of this being a blockbuster $125 million film that's supposed to start a fantasy franchise, I'm a little shocked that I could just watch 2 episodes of The Boys and that would last longer than this movie. This movie is also fairly limited in where we go. We have this whole magical world to explore, but a majority of the time we are spending in this mansion. It's just this mansion with Artemis and his butler, who's named Butler, but you're not supposed to say his name is Butler, but that never comes up. I'm sorry. There's just like some weird details that is brought up, but I'm not seeing it in action. So we have this whole movie set basically in a standoff between these leprechauns and Artemis Fowl. And they're both looking for this MacGuffin device that could end the world, or something called the Oculus. The Arculus? Acrylus. The Arculus. The Acrylus? I don't remember the name of it. The Oculus. And that's another problem with the movie. We don't see this item until the very end. We don't know what its effects are. We only are told what it is. And we don't see it in action. And there are other just small story details that kind of just come and go. There's a whole detail about there's an underling leprechaun that takes over and forms a coup, but there are no repercussions for it. There was also a scene where the butler character, again named Butler, sacrificed himself, and on his deathbed, Artemis recites the poem that he and his dad would always tell each other every night, and he dies. But literally, he only is dead for like probably 5 seconds, and then boom, he's brought back to life with magic. It didn't really leave a lasting impact on me. Nor did these characters really have enough of an interaction with each other to form a relationship that I cared about. Again, why do I care? There's also, if you looked at the trailer, there was a scene that was cut out and completely missing, involving them going to Indonesia, somewhere in the South Pacific, maybe East Asia. I can't really tell, but it explored both Butler and Artemis walking around and going on different locations, and that seemed like a great opportunity for them to bounce off each other. So coming from an editing background, there's a couple of times where I kind of had to just sit back and rewatch a scene again, because there were just certain things that were happening that kind of just made me do like a weird double take, like, wait, hold on 1 second. There's a couple of times where there are lines that are like specifically ADR'd in to fill in gaps of scenes where the actors on set that day didn't say those lines, except for the fact that they would 80-yard the line, cut back to Artemis, who's not saying anything, and then cut back to what he's looking at, and then the 80-yard line would go again.
They're real. Everything my father said was true.
That just seemed a bit off. There's another scene where Mulch like opens a lock. Also, his beard moves. Again, he unlocks it, and then Artemis and this fairy girl, who I have not mentioned at all, but again, why do I care? Just appear out of the background.
Step back, Mr. Diggums.
It's real.
And it made me think that there was a scene that they hadn't shot yet, or they just didn't get enough coverage for. Again, there's just a lot of areas, editing-wise, where I felt like they had to fill in the gaps that were empty because there's issues with the shooting schedule. Maybe some actors weren't able to make it on certain days. I don't know. I don't blame Kenneth Branagh. The guy clearly knows how to direct films. He directed Henry V, and he also directed Thor. So he knows how to direct fantasy, and he knows how to direct grand-esque epics. So on paper, he would have been a great director to get involved with this story. I just felt like maybe he was being limited by the studio. Maybe there is budgeting issues. I felt like this film just was hit with a lot of small issues that snowballed into a lot of bigger problems. I think for the case of Artemis Fowl, it was a movie that just had great intentions, but just was hit with so many bad punches. So those are my thoughts on Artemis Fowl. Fans of the books, what did you think about this film? Did it meet your expectations? Did it falter your expectations? Also, what wasn't involved in the movie that was in the book? I really want to know. What made you fans of Artemis Fowl, and was that shown in the film? I kind of want to know. All right, well, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.